Provide data on it. Okay. So we just want help on like how we're gonna go about this project. And our first question is, so imagine you're the head of a small or medium enterprise in the tertiary sector, and you're writing your first report, or sustainability report. Given like typical SME limitations, how would you decide which performance metrics to report on? Like which criteria would you think of to choose like what's important to report on?
I mean the tertiary sector?
Yeah.
Did you slip that in?
Yeah. Okay, so we narrowed it down to tertiary sector, like for service industries, and like we're more focusing on like office marketing that aren't heavy on, they're not like doing mining or like
Or manufacturing.
Yeah, manufacturing. So just narrows down our field.
My mind changed on this last week, interestingly.
Who?
I was at a conference. And the advice that was given was don't do corporate reporting. Instead, do product and service reporting. Because that's your core business.
Right.
And then the metrics are those metrics that revolve around your product, or if you're a tertiary sector, around the service that you provide.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
And I haven't quite figured out what that means entirely.
So if you weren't to go to this
Conference?
conference,
If I wasn't going to this conference,
Yes.
If you did go.
if you didn't go, what would your opinion be before this?
That's interesting though, I never thought of that. To not report sustainability reports and just do a service report.
well, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
But well, I would probably just give a list. You know, there's a list of areas that correspond to cost and other accounting or management performance areas that are sustainability related. So your energy, if it's tertiary, maybe your kilometers traveled,
Mm-hmm.
you can go to water, you can go to some measures of
Mm-hmm.
things that cost you money, so mostly around energy, and then you convert that over to some emissions.
Okay.
Because that's what costs you money. Water doesn't cost you very much money. Chemicals purchases are going to be pretty minor.
Mm-hmm.
I met with a company last week which is in the secondary sector, and they're a big manufacturer, and their largest water use is toilets. They've measured it. That's how tight they've tightened up their manufacturing. That toilets was their biggest
That's pretty- that's pretty
water
How many
consumption.
flushes a day?
And she was serious. She's serious. So what do we do about this? That's where they were in their journey.
Oh wow.
So I was pretty impressed.
Interesting.
Okay.
But to come back to my previous point, it depends on the service that you're providing. So if you're providing, we're education. So this is a tertiary sector.
Right.
We're an education, not an SME, but we're an education
Mm-hmm.
provider. So wouldn't it be interesting to provide metrics per student taught, or per degree granted, or per research dollar spent?
So you're
Yeah.
looking
So
at
that's the denominator, but the numerator would probably be the same sorts of things. It would probably be energy and water
Yeah, for our project we
and land use, maybe.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're trying to normalize it too by like emissions per employee hour, or we have to figure out exactly what it is, but to make it
The
more
denominator is really important.
Yeah.
You got the numerator. It's like your question was more on a numerator, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the denominator is really interesting because there's all sorts of things you can do with that.
Right.
Per surface area, per employee, per dollar,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
per unit of profit.
Mm-hmm. think the kilometers traveled, that kind of ties in with one of the companies that we're looking into, Celonet, because they do services, they go to their clients to do the services.
Yeah.
So, and they have 4 hybrid cars that they have
Yeah.
come like, that was their initial thing, that they're gonna use hybrid cars to
Yeah.
cut down emission by however much. So that was a good one.
Yeah. But, I also met with a company last week that, they were reporting on GHG emissions
Mhm.
per everything, per employee and per dollar and per factory and whatever. It was a manufacturing outfit. But then they started over the last couple of years to do more production in China. And it's easy to reduce GHGs in China through fuel switching,
Mhm.
or they could easily buy offsets.
Mhm.
So they decided that by actually reporting on a GHG target wasn't tough enough, because there were ways to sort of game it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had managers at facilities figuring out cheap ways of saving GHGs. So they moved it to an energy efficiency target, which is sort of anti-intuitive, because instead of being the final emission to the environment of the emission, they moved it back a step to energy, which is more an input. But it forced everybody to actually save energy, and it was a tougher target for their facilities. Anyway, I'm going all over the place.
Yeah.
No, it's just
No, it's
interesting
good
to hear.
information, definitely.
Yeah, it's good thing it's recorded. Okay.
Yeah. Whoops.
So when we're going back on like how an SME would decide what they want to report on, we came up with a kind of criteria, because in our project we plan to use this like criteria checklist, so to speak.
But before you give me just the other category is, I would go for some social criteria too.
Oh yeah.
So
we're
not
doing-
just limited to environment.
We
Right.
have all 3.
So,
actually-
Social, economic, and
okay,
environmental.
so on the social front, again, you
It's
come
not
back to
policy.
things that are more specific to the organization. And it probably has to do with metrics of employment and type of employees that you have, wage disparity, and then you could go out and look at sort of community type impacts. But those are so much harder to specify what they
Right.
would be.
Mhm.
Oh, I just didn't want to.
Yeah, no, thanks.
No.
For the metrics that we're going to use for this framework, we're relying on a lot of GRI, and so that's going to be like our basis, but we wanted to narrow it down for SMEs because they don't have time to go through it all. They're like 80-something metrics. So we came up with a table of like, sort of like a checklist that, for instance, someone might go, like we're going to go through GRI, and each metric has to pass this criteria to be put into this framework, like either yes or no.
Okay.
So that's how we plan on kind of evaluating whether a metric should be in the framework.
What's a pass if it's on a scale of 1 to 4?
Oh, okay, so how it works is, it's just criteria, and it's going to be either yes or no, but then the weight is how important this criteria is. Like, for instance, if it's a legal requirement to report on, like, hazardous waste, but it's going to be more important. Like, it's a higher importance, I guess. The actual criteria itself, not the metric.
Okay.
So we were hoping,
Like, get your opinion as to
yeah,
which
get
ones do
feedback
you
on
think that if that we're just keeping it from like the first question, like if you were head of a smaller or medium sized enterprise, and you would wanna see that which ones do you think that it's gonna be more important to you? So basically, according to
If I'm still in the tertiary sector, though,
uh-huh.
I don't think there's anything I have to legally report. Is there?
yeah, we're going through that. So
There's
that's,
very few things that I have to report.
Right.
yeah, that's true.
And none of them,
Because
none of them
it's
really
a
impact.
choice.
None of them impact the tertiary sector. Are data readily available? Yeah. Can data be easily analyzed and transferred into report? Well, isn't that's a bit redundant, because they're available. If they're available, they should be readily anyway.
Okay.
Will tracking the metric identify potential areas for improvement and cost reduction? So that goes to my issue of
Yeah, that was your.
Is this metric relevant to SME and tertiary sector? Maybe that should be the first question. Is the metric of particular interest to internal stakeholders? That's a good one. Is the metric of particular interest to external stakeholders? Is the impact of this metric significant? Ooh, you mean environmentally significant, sustainable significant?
Yeah, for that one. But because it's like service industry, it's not, you're not gonna have like chemical leaks and stuff, hopefully. So
Yeah,
that's-
but you know, it is actually, I like differentiating. You might put the last one, is the impact of this metric scientifically significant? Because
Okay.
that's sort of a nice way of separating it from stakeholder significance.
Mhm.
So the one that comes to mind is, well, even that toilet example. It's like, well, scientifically, it's not terribly significant because I'm probably spending more water in my shower in the morning than I do at the toilets at work.
Right.
So scientifically, it's not very big, but stakeholder perception-wise, she was pretty serious about it, that they wanted to do, because they were a water valve manufacturer. That's part of the reason. So it was important for them to have all the water stuff figured out. But then I can remember too, last couple of months ago, I was looking at a report, and they had differentiated indicators that they called significant, I think they called them,
Mhm.
from those that they called hotspot. They used the word hotspot indicators, which weren't necessarily scientifically relevant, but were important to different stakeholders because
Right.
it was something that their customers asked about, or it was
Mhm.
something that their employees. So I like that. I like that part.
Okay. Any other comments? Because we like this.
Well,
is
the legal one, I don't know what you can do with that, because I really don't think there's any, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think there's too many legal requirements.
So we should scratch that completely, or?
Well, if you're really limited to the tertiary sector, I'd think about, well, what, like this university, I suppose technically this is a tertiary sector, but we do have a
We do have.
smokestack,
Yeah.
and we do have labs, so there could be service industries that have labs, or, you know, you have to get into toxic, you have to get into MSDS sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You have to get into occupational health and safety stuff, you have to get into large quantities of toxic compounds, or large amounts of GHGs, which this university doesn't even qualify for,
Mhm.
before you have to report.
Right.
Are there social things that have to be reported? That might be different. Maybe there's social criteria that have to be reported.
Okay.
You know, at the end of the day, I do have to, if I'm an employer, I do have to report a bank, like a payroll.
Mhm.
My payroll effectively is reported to the tax authorities.
Right.
For the legal requirement, can it be focused more on health and safety?
Well, in a tertiary sector, that's unusual. Well, not really. I
You-
suppose
you
restaurants, hotels,
Or
yeah.
accidents.
Because you have like health and safety regulations, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
Okay.
But it's not a reporting requirement.
no, it's not.
It's like I have to follow the reg. I
Yeah.
have to have the right safety equipment in place. I have
Right.
to have a fire plan or whatever.
Okay.
It's not a reporting requirement, though.
Okay.
Well, I guess
Is
there's
the
like
difference I mean.
the one I think of is accidents. When you have an accident of a certain like lost
Yes.
time, then you have
Yeah.
to report it right to the W.
Women's.
Yeah.
Women's, yeah.
So.
Yeah, so that's health
Then-
and safety. Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah. So I think it's not completely relevant, but it does narrow down like, it takes off a lot of things that we need to, like, it takes a lot of metrics out of GRI that we would think are relevant to an SME.
Well, sorry,
But-
which way do you go then with that? If you do have to report it, then is it included in your report? Is
Yeah,
it
so if
included in my
it's,
report? If I
uh,
don't have to report it, is it not included?
Well, if the yes or no, it has, you range it over the entire like table, and if it's enough yeses, then it'll be included into the report.
Okay.
And if
It's just like
not-
energy is something I don't have to report.
Yeah, but then it'll be like, for instance, it'll be a yes for is that readily available, it's easily analyzed.
Yeah.
Are people interested
it,
in it?
it
So
relates to cost. It's something that's the data is
Yeah.
available.
Mhm.
My stakeholders care about it. It's possibly significant.
yeah.
So
So-
it gets 5 yeses on this.
Right.
So that's how we're trying to like
Alright.
sieve out, so to speak,
Mhm.
the GRI metrics. Because for instance, they have stuff about like human rights, like that's like child labor. It's not a legal requirement to report it because by law you shouldn't have it at all.
Yeah.
So that's kind of we'll take that out. It's yeah. Anyway, so do you have any other comments on the metrics? Because the criteria, this is a huge bulk of our project so far in our desktop study. So we appreciate any more comments, even though we're trying to like extract as much information from you as possible on this.
Yeah. Like, you want another criterion or other?
Yeah, that'd be.
You could break the stakeholders up a little bit more into, because customers would be very important,
Right.
employees would be very important, NGOs for an SME are not
Yeah, they're not
terribly relevant. Oh, another one that comes up more and more is, which is embedded in here kind of, is you could sort of think about it by the different functional areas of a company. So does marketing care about it? Does finance care about it? Does occupational health and safety care about it?
Right.
And if finance and marketing care about it, it's going to be much more important, much easier to sell
Right.
than if it's simply an operational issue.
Okay.
And that's where energy is interesting, because probably marketing doesn't care about it, but there could be certain instances where they do.
Mhm.
And where again, this is something that I've seen more of, is that in contracts now that companies get, there are starting to be sustainability clauses that say you're a provider to me, and if I request sustainability data, you're going to give it to me. That's in the contract. Because you're part of my supply chain, and I need to do a carbon footprint for my whole supply chain.
Mhm.
And the marketing people are signing these, the sales and marketing people are signing these contracts. Of course, it says $10 million at the top. Of course I'm going to sign it. And then 2 months later, they're reading this little clause at the bottom that says sustainability data will be provided.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, the sustainability department is central to this contract, and they didn't even know it existed before. So.
It would be hard for construction people, I would assume. Like, right?
Well, but that's a good sector. That's a sector where it's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's so good. That's actually yeah, because the company.
So
I
that's
work at too-
that's a criterion that
Because
has
the real estate
surprised.
one, Marcos.
That's a criterion that has surprised some businesses because they didn't see it coming.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's even when I was working. They just like showed up we requested this information from like one of our contractors. And they're like, no, we can't supply this.
No.
I'm like, but you signed it. Like it's such a like debate anyway.
Well, that's why it's being written into contracts, because 10 years ago, it was a friendly request.
Right.
It's like, oh, you're a supplier, can you give me this? And if I'm asking of you and you're a sales guy,
Mhm.
you're gonna go, I don't know what that is. No, it's like, but if it's part of the contract,
Right, makes sense.
Okay, yeah,
Cool.
the functions of business. Okay.
So just need the weight now.
Oh yeah. So basically our final question is, so the weight. So
oh, you want me to fill this in?
yes, that is for you. So how would you rate this criterion in terms of importance from 1 lowest to 4 highest? Like which one should be more heavily considered? For instance, if you think that internal stakeholders are more important than external stakeholders, it would have a lower number, like a 3 versus a 4, or etc.
Well, I'd probably rate external as a 4 and internal as a 3. Assuming that the external includes customers.
Yeah. Take your time.
Well, so is the metric relevant to SME in the tertiary? Isn't that like the top question though?
Technically, that's like the deciding factor. We didn't have this in order of any kind. It's just
Yeah, but so I would put that up top, and it's really a 4 as well, in the sense that if it's not relevant,
Then it doesn't.
then it shouldn't be here. And the significance, I would probably do like a 3 or a 2. I don't know, I'm gonna be ranking everything a 3 or a 4 here at this rate, but mind you, the legal requirement, I don't think the legal requirement is a really good question, the way it's phrased. Data availability is important. Can data easily be transferred? Sure. Will tracking the data, that's probably a bit more important. So, but they're almost yes, no's, because if you don't have data,
Then you
you're not gonna be reporting on it.
Mhm.
If you're not connecting it to cost or continual improvement or something,
Mm.
You may choose not to report on it. So they're
Yeah.
you almost have to get, you know, if you combine the two data, you have to have data, so that's a yes or a no.
Mhm.
Will it relate to operational efficiencies, cost reduction, that sort of thing? That's almost a yes or a no, so it has to do that. If it doesn't do that,
Mhm.
I suppose if it doesn't do that, but your customers are asking for it, you'd still do it.
Right.
So the customer request, either it has to, so I'm just
Yeah, keep going.
brainstorming through here. So you have to have data,
Mhm.
so this is almost a yes or a no. And is it significant, like scientifically significant? Well, unfortunately, that's not gonna drive a lot of stuff. I think the other thing then is it either has to be, you know, it has to go to operational efficiency, and then you'll do it, or it has to go to one of your important stakeholders. Your customers are asking for it.
Mhm.
So you could, instead of doing it like this, you could almost do like a decision tree that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the
Goes
yes or
out
no
like
and then the
this.
arrows.
So, you know, is it relevant? Yes, I don't know, I'm not doing decision tree, okay. Well, it has to be relevant.
Mm.
Yeah. So the yes is one way. No is just
I'm messing this up. Anyway, so the decision then ultimately, you have to have the data,
yeah.
and then it has to be either or both, your
Mm.
stakeholders or your operations. And then the scientific significance is a nice to have.
Mm.
Okay.
So you've only really got 3 things. You have to have the data
Right.
and be able to do something with it.
Mm.
And then it has to either be your customers externally,
Mm.
Okay.
or some other important external stakeholder, maybe the community.
Right.
For tertiary sector, probably not, but there could be instances. Or it has to be your employees that
Okay.
really desire it.
Mhm.
And the customer probably ranks above the employees.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was good.
there, narrowed it down to 3 things.
Perfect.
Okay. For the reason why the weight, it's not only just yes or no. The weight's there. It's just like, yeah, after you've done this. It's also because we want to make like an index, so to speak. I'm just letting you know. It's just, like questions we've done.
Yeah, sure.
And to choose like